I want to give you the overview of Form 8332 here, as you can see on the screen here. So we are speaking here about the release, revocation of a release of claim to exemption for child by custodial parents. And so what you want to do here is you want to put your first name, last name, and then you want to put the non-custodial parent's social security number. And so it's really important to understand that you have to be really clear here. Whatever you put, this is actually a legal document. It has a force of a legal document. So any information you put here can actually be used in a court of law or in legal proceedings. So be very clear, be very accurate here. So let's talk about part one. So part one really deals with the release of claim to exemption for a current year. So basically, you have to put the name of the child on the first line, and you have to put the year. So if this is applicable to the tax year 2023, you have to specify that. And if it's 2024, you specify that as well also. So you put the name of the child, and you also have to put, it's important to really understand that you have to sign. So we need to have the signature of the custodial parents releasing claim to exemption, so that the other parents, okay, that has agreed to release claim to exemption has to put his or her signature there, has to put his or her social, and has to put the date. So everything is clear. The IRS knows that you have actually secured the release from the other party. So that's for part one. What about part two? Part two is actually about the release of claim to exemption for future years. And so here also the process is still similar. So you put, for instance, I agree not to claim an exemption for this kid, blah blah blah, for the tax years, and you have to specify the tax years, and then you have the process is kind of similar. We have to have the signature of the custodial parents releasing claim to exemption, and then the custodial parents' social security number, as well as the date. So again, everything is clear in the eyes of the IRS. Everything is clear in the eyes of the parents actually releasing custody. So this is kind of important in terms of, again, I want to say that you want to you want to make sure data here is kind of accurate, because this form has a force of a legal has a legal force, so it can be used in legal proceedings. So yeah, this is important. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. Now let's talk about part three here. We are speaking about revocation of release of claim to exemption for future years. And so here you have to, again, process is kind of similar. So you have to say, I revoke the release of claim to an exemption to for this child and for the tax year, and the parent that actually is revoking the release of claim to exemption has to put his or her signature, and we're speaking about, and also the social security number and the date. Now, what I want to say here is that it's important to really understand that when we talk about revocation of release of claim to exemption, let's say for future years, or let's say the part two, the release of claim to exemption for future years, and it's important to understand it's all about giving flexibility in terms of tax filing. So if you are a custodial parent or a non-custodial parent, you are actually sort of exchanging, if you will, exchanging flexibility here in terms of who should actually file as a head of household, and who should actually claim that the child as a dependent when filing tax returns. Of course, we're speaking here about it cannot be a joint filing process. It has to be a separate filing process. In other words, the parents are either divorced or they are separated, and they are actually filing their taxes on their own or with their current partners. Okay, and this is important for the IRS. When we talk about Form 8332, we're talking about a form that is really clear in terms that really provides clear instructions to the IRS on how to classify taxpayers and also their dependents. And what I want to insist on the fact that when we talk about a dependent child is either a qualifying child or a qualifying relative. And so there are instructions for your so we're really qualified as a child. But generally, what we have here is that a child of divorced or separated parents will be a qualifying child of the custodial parents. So the custodial parents actually has some kind of a power here. But what I want to say here is that when we talk about custodial parents and non-custodial parents, the custodial parents is generally the parents with whom the child lived for the greater number of nights during the year. The non-custodial parents is the other parents. If the child was with each parent for an equal number of nights, the custodial parent is the parent with a higher adjusted gross income. Boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 8332. Please stay tuned. You're going to love today's conversation. Let me give you the approach to really pay attention to here. So when we talk about Form 8332 in general, it's really one of those things where you have to adjust this form or the data on this form every single year, because one year you can say, you know what, I'm revoking my claim, and the other year I'm releasing the claim. So it's one of those things where you have to adjust, and you can file this form in as many years as possible, or as needed rather. And it's one of those things where you have to understand that the IRS is actually updating its records based on your request. Now, if you have custody of your child but let's say you want to release the right to claim your child as a dependent to the non-custodial parents, you'll need to fill out this form 8332. And all that's needed is your child's name, the tax year, your social security number, and then your signature and dates. And if you prefer to release your claim for more than one tax year, you want to enter the same information in Part 2 instead of a Part 1. And as you saw earlier, right, you'll also use the form to revoke a previous release of an exemption claim. So that's what I was telling you, that you have to update this form every year depending upon the situation. And one of those things is that you are giving the non-custodial parents the ability to also claim, quote unquote, claim and enjoy the benefits of filing as a head of household, for instance. Okay. Now, once complete, you want to give the form to your child's non-custodial parents. Now the IRS, they will file it with their tax return. And if you actually release your claim for multiple tax years, you only need to fill out the form once. The other parents will attach copies of the original to their return each year. So again, everything is clear to the IRS. It's just one of those things where the IRS wants to have a clear idea that, hey, listen, yes, the other parent is okay. The custodial parents is okay with actually not claiming the child on their tax returns. Because if the child lives with the custodial parents, the custodial parent has a right to actually claim the child as a dependent, really. One thing I want to say here is that the non-custodial parents must be eligible, because otherwise things will not work. What does that mean, really? Well, the thing is that there are certain situations where the non-custodial parents is eligible, and certain situations where he or she is not eligible. The child's non-custodial parents must be eligible to claim the child as a dependent. Now, the rules for claiming a dependent usually require the parents to live with the child for more than half the year. This rule can be waived when the parents are divorced, separated, or live apart from each other. And so for this waiver to apply, more than half of the money needed to support your child must come from you and the non-custodial parents. In addition, your child must not live with anyone other than you and the non-custodial parents for more than 6 months of the year. And this is once those conditions are satisfied, then you have a clear idea of what's really working. And what we have here is that if your child's non-custodial parents is not eligible, giving them a completed Form 8332 doesn't change the fact that they cannot claim the child anyway. So it's one of those things where before you actually give them the form, make sure that they are in a situation where they can claim the child as a dependent. In other words, they can file as a head of household and really enjoy the benefits. And one thing I want to say also is that when we talk about this, everything that I'm telling you here happens at the federal level. You got to make sure that you are in tune with tax laws in your state. And so if you have any question, let us know in the comment section, and tell us where you're commenting from, your city and state, so where you are at, so we can actually provide like contextual guidance. We can tell you exactly what happens in the state where you're at, or you can just contact the authorities in your state to really see how things work in terms of non-custodial versus custodial parents. And one thing I want to say here also is that things can be a little complicated if the non-custodial parents lives in one state and the custodial parents lives in another state. So that you have two states that are really in the equation here. And so you have to actually abide by tax rules in all states that are involved. And it can be even more complicated if there is a third state involved. In other words, the non-custodial or custodial parents works in a state that is different than the state they live in. Okay, but yeah. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's conversation. We are speaking about Form 8332. Now let's talk about what you actually give up with Form 8332. The thing is that it's all about flexibility. Yeah, that's true, right? But you are giving up something because you are giving the other party, in other words, the non-custodial parents, the ability to actually claim the child as a dependent. So giving the completed Form 8332 to the non-custodial parents actually gives up more than just a dependent. For example, additional child tax credits are only available to the person who claims the child as a dependent. So it's one of those things where you have to really see if this works for you. Don't just say, you know what, I'm just releasing this right this year. No, no, no. The thing is that if you do it this year, you are actually releasing the rights to other credits and other benefits as well. Now, taking your child dependency claim back. Well, as the custodial parents, if you decide to, let's say, to start claiming your child as a dependent, again, after you have released it to the non-custodial parents, you can do so by completing Part 3 of Form 8332. You saw that earlier. And you can do this for the specific tax years you list, or write all future years. So reclaiming the dependency is not effective until the tax year after the calendar year in which you provide your child's non-custodial parents with Form 8332. In other words, let's say if you provide the form in this year, 2024, for instance, the earliest you can reclaim the dependent is on your 2025 tax return, which you will file in 2026 rather. Okay, and so this is one of those things where you have to really have a clear idea. One thing I want to say here is that you are able to file this form electronically, by the way, and so it's one of those things where you just electronic filing is a lot faster because it really provides things to the IRS in real time. And so you can file this Form 8332 electronically. You can provide it but remember, you do not provide this form to the IRS. No, you are giving this form to the other party, the non-custodial parents. But the non-custodial parents is the one who is attaching this form when filing his or her taxes, Form 1040. So, but you can actually do everything electronically, but you can print it out and then mail it or just email it to the non-custodial parents for more information. One thing I want to say here is that when we talk about Form 8332, you need to understand that you're not just, I think I've said this before, you're not just releasing the claim to exemption for a child by custodial parents. We're talking about the child tax credit. We're talking about the additional child tax credit. And we're speaking about the credit for other dependents. So this trifecta is kind of important. This form applies to some tax benefits, okay, the three tax benefits that I just listed. However, Form 8332 does not apply to other tax benefits, such as the Earned Income Credit, the EIC. You have the Child and Dependent Care Credit, and the Head of Household Filing Status. So it's one of those things where you have to really be clear as to what works for you. Now, in the past, what we have seen in our research is that in the past, divorce decrees or separation agreements could be used to substitute Form 8332. However, this is no longer permitted. Another substitute option exists, but it's not very practical. You can actually substitute Form 8332 with a written document that includes the name, the same information as the form, provided the document's sole purpose is to serve as a substitute. Given the work needed to create a substitute tax Form 8332 that contains all the requirements, it's probably easiest to use the form itself. Okay, and if you fail to file Form 8332 release of claims, in some cases, non-custodial parents have claimed their children but never received a signed Form 8332 or a substitute statement. However, that oversight might have consequences. So if you are ever audited, which you could, the IRS might actually disallow your exemptions from previous years, child tax credit, or credit for other dependents without one of these statements. So it's one of those things where you have to really see what really applies to your situation. And while another relative may be able to claim your child as a qualifying child, Form 8332 will not be needed to claim the dependent. In order for the relative to claim the child, he or she would have to live with the relative, for example, grandparents, uncle, aunt, for over half of the year, as well as meet other qualifications. Additionally, the child must not provide more than half of his or her support. So there has to be a situation where we have a specific link to dependency here. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And it's one of those things where, again, if you have any question, let us know in the comment section, and we'll certainly get back to you. One thing I want to say in general here is that when we talk about Form 8332, it's all about flexibility. Okay, remember that it's all about flexibility. It's one of those things where you have to really make sure that you are providing the other party, in other words, the non-custodial parents, the ability to actually claim the child. And generally, the custodial parents receives more tax benefits than the non-custodial because the child is their dependent, right? Most parental tax benefits require that the child lives with you more than half the year, and or that both parents provide more than half of the child's total support. So if you file Form 8332, a majority of the tax benefits you receive as the custodial parents will not be affected. The earned income tax credit, as I showed you earlier, right? The child and dependent care credit and head of household filing status are unaffected by waiving your child's dependency exemption. As the custodial parent, you are still entitled to these benefits as long as you meet the other rules surrounding the tax benefits. And it's one of those things where you have to really make sure that it really works for you. And one thing you need to remember is that if you file Form 8332, the non-custodial parents will receive the allowable amounts of child tax credit and additional child tax credit. So it's one of those things where you are, again, seeing your situation and see what really works for you. One thing I want to say here is that it's one of those things where you have to make sure that you have it has to be done on a year by year basis. In other words, you can say, you know what, I'm releasing. I think I've said this before, but I want to say it again because it's important that all our viewers understand. You can say, you know what, this year I'm just releasing the claim of exemption. Next year I'm revoking it. So it has to be done on a year by year basis. Things change, people change. You never know. You could agree to something this year and say, you know what, next year I do not want to agree to it, and then things change automatically. One thing I also want to say here is that when we talk about your ability to change things going forward, you got to be in a situation where you are constantly changing everything that goes beyond the specific purview of your Form 1040, or let's just say of your filing status. So maybe your filing status this year is head of household, and next year you are saying, you know what, I'm just filing single, or I'm just filing I'm filing married. It really depends on your situation. But long story short, when you file Form 8332, you are making things transparent to the IRS. But please make sure that you also clarify things for state tax authorities, because the things on the state side may be different from what they are on the federal side, and you just want to make sure that you have this sort of clarity also when it comes to the state to your state tax directives. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let me do a quick recap here. So in today's conversation, I spoke to you about Form 8332. So I gave you the overview, the approach, and now the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.